Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we have an epic debut SmackDown. The Cars debut versus Austin's debut album. We're going back in time. Martin is here. The panel is here. We got a big one. Let's do it. Welcome to the Contrarians. Tonight we have really kind of an interesting topic. Now, first of all, before we get started, was there anybody on this panel that suggested this? I don't know where it came on. It dropped out of heaven, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely.
But dig this topic. Who had the better debut album, Boston or the Cars? Now, I know what I feel. It's probably a very contrarian take on it, but it's going to be interesting to see what this panel says. So tonight we have David, we have Butch, we've got the Parish of Rock, and then Martin and myself, and this is going to be a lot of fun. We do want to hear from you in the comments section. Which album? Who had the better debut? Boston or the Cars? So let us know down below. We want to see. All right, let's get started. So we don't really have to rank anything. We're just having an open discussion. And I think I'm just going to start as I see it. David was here first. Let's start with him, and we'll just go. We'll go David, Martin, Butch, Parish, and me, and let's just keep it light and let's just talk about it. David, what's your thoughts on this? Who had the better debut?
So this one was an interesting topic when I jumped on. Like probably everybody maybe on here has maybe one of these they prefer. Certainly I lean one way in terms of the band and the album that I like better, but, so I think the end result, maybe I knew out of the gate, but then, really taking a look at it, head to head, they're very different, but also not so different, right? At face value, I kind of looked at it as, one being sort of the 70s AOR rock band and one kind of being maybe the precursor or the beginning of sort of the new wave synth. I mean, they're 2 years apart in these records, 76 and 78. But really, I mean, both, when I think about it, both of the albums are really rooted in technology, right? I mean, even though Boston's album was really, kind of considered, 70s to, on the face, really sort of a 70s AOR, whatever, kind of a, band really was leaning into what Schultz was doing and leaning into technology, was really not as far away from new wave, right? Sort of maybe in some ways could be looked at sort of as a little bit of a bridge between the two, just because of all the, MIT guys, Schultz, and the technology really was. So I found a sort of a synergy or a similarity in the two, and sort of the use of technology, and although different, but I saw that similarity. Certainly the Boston record, if you look at, I'm sure everybody's going to go through it, but I won't belabor it. But if you look at overall sales or U.S. sales and charting, I mean, certainly the Boston record, has the edge there overall. I mean, both albums had 3 pretty strong singles, arguably, pretty strong all the way through. I happen to think the Boston record in particular, there's not a dud on it, right? I mean, it's only 8 songs, and neither of them are particularly long in terms of songs, right? One 9 songs, one 8 songs. So neither of them are super long in terms of number of songs. But yeah, I did think that, sort of that synergy between in technology between the two. And then that made me think of the, Schultz and sort of the impact of Boston in terms of technology and being a guitar player. For those of you that remember the Rockman, right? I mean, it went as far as to have the sound, how do I get the Boston sound? Well, we can put it in a box and you can plug your guitar and you too can sound like Tom Schultz, right? So that's how much influence really was going on. Although this thing takes 8 AA batteries and no AC, but whatever, it burns through batteries. But it was cool. I mean, where else were they doing things like that, right?
But David, did you see that MXR just brought out the Rockman pedal?
I did. I've not heard it, but I did see it. I think it was sort of debuted pretty recently, maybe at the recent NAMM show. But yeah, they've got a pedal, updated pedal version of this. So really, there was a lot of influence, right? I mean, the Boston record, the sound of that record was very influential, certainly to musicians. Everyone's trying to, how do you get that sound? I mean, to the point where there's this kind of thing out in the market. So, I won't go through step by step. I'll sort of pass along. It was kind of an open discussion, but I think for me, I lean Boston in terms of the two. And I will say that going in, I thought the gap was fairly wide for me, but I think what I learned going through both of these is the gap between the two is really not very wide when it comes down to it. Though the Boston edges, in my opinion, it's not as difference between the two. I think it's a lot closer than I had anticipated. So I'll lean Boston, and I'll pass it along and let somebody else.
It's too bad we didn't do this as a live show.
Yeah.
If we would have done this as a live show, we could have polled the audience. We could have got a better representation. If we do this again, we have to remember we should do this live because we could bring all these people in. This would be a great topic. But I must say, I know I'm on a tangent. I can't help it, Davis. So is that your original Rockman that you had in the 80s when you were a kid?
Rockman, Tom Schultz, from the 80s, whenever this thing came out. So like I said, it only powers up with 8 batteries. There's no way to plug it in.
I love it.
But yeah, it's
we wouldn't have the album Hysteria if it wasn't for the Rockman.
Right?
I think the whole thing was recorded on a Rockman. All the guitar parts.
A lot of it, yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
David, were you supposed to clip that onto your belt? It looks like there's a clip on it on the
belt. You can wear
headphones.
headphones.
Clip on this thing, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, kind of goofy, right? Like we can do walk around. It's sort of like the idea of like, since it doesn't plug in, it's portable. So you just put the 8 AA's, then you could plug it in, put on your belt or on your strap or whatever.
Run it into a guitar amp.
Yeah. Put your headphones on, and you're walking around. But I don't know that I ever put on a belt. I just kind of more of a sit in the room and put on the desk kind of thing. But yeah, good eye. It doesn't have a belt clip. I don't know if anybody ever used it. But yeah.
So great. There you go. Hysteria, though. You wouldn't have Hysteria without it. That's the sound of the Rockman. So anyway.
Does that mean we need to go back in time and destroy the Rockman then?
Maybe. I know Martin would probably like to do that.
It's a good sound. It's a good sound.
Yeah, but is it a good album, Martin?
Well, okay. So I would say I'll start with an anecdote that I've said many times, but Billy Squire told me once. He says, "Yeah, I was in a bar and I walked up to Rick Ocasek, and he was all excited about this band. He says, I've got this new band going. We're calling it the Cars." And Billy looked at him and said, "Yeah, good luck with that. Nice name." Sort of thing.
Yeah, it is kind of an odd name, but
yeah, it is. It's an odd name like the Police, right? It kind of takes over. But my favorite Boston debut is this one. For a Boston band. Now, I'm kidding. I actually like both the Cars and Boston quite a bit more than this, but I do love this album as well. I love all of them. And I think this is a pretty lousy Boston debut.
Not a good one.
Yeah, not particularly good, but then they get better. And by the time you get to 1976, I like this more than the Boston album, but the Boston album might even be more magical than this album, although this has a lot of magic as well. But so I think the point between these albums is that, so you've got Boston comes out August 25th, 76. Aerosmith Rocks is May 3rd, 76. Billy Squire's got Piper going. He's got Piper and then the second Piper. He's got a debut himself, Tail the Tape, 1980, right? So there are some other Boston bands. There's Dirty Angels. There's Jonathan Richman. There's Thunder Train, right? But what I would say is that both the Cars album and the Boston album are incredible. I think what Boston is doing is they're like perfecting an AOR sound. So they're perfecting a sound that's been around for a little while, not a long while. They're actually almost inventing it in a way. Like they're perfecting it immediately, almost like Rat perfects hair metal in the very first year kind of thing, right? So they're making like the masterpiece of this AOR, pomp rock, MOR, heavy yacht rock, foreigner type music before anybody else. To do that in 76, that's pretty amazing, right? And yeah, every song's amazing, the production's great, Brad Delp's great, and all that stuff, right? Whereas Cars, what they're doing is they've got this magical artistic thing they've put together. It's not all about craft. It's just these weird guys getting together. They've been around for a while, and then Roy Thomas Baker is part of it, and he doesn't make any sense for a band like this. This is a new wave band, but somehow they make it work. And I love, David, what you said about technology, because, you know, this is you've got a very elaborate, fussy, fancy, expensive producer. There's a lot of ear candy on this album, but it's not the same kind of technology as the rest of the Cars albums. There's a lot of guitar, bass, and drums on this. It's a pretty heavy album, right? And then they start sounding like Devo after this kind of thing, right? They get very minimalistic. But so what you have here is that it's a new, fresh kind of music, and they're just a really good band with a lot of personality, and just they've got the songs, and it's just like this subjective, abstract, creative magic happens to make this great album. Whereas the Boston album, it's more like a well-crafted, complicated, simple, sober sort of thing, and they're doing a music that kind of already exists already. So the Cars thing's just more exciting on kind of like an artistic level rather than a engineering production level, I suppose. I think over time I probably always liked the Boston album more, but I think in say over the last 15 years or so, I think I have more time for the Cars album. I really do like this album. It's beautifully put together, and you got those eccentric, almost like English accent vocals in it and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just a really kind of exciting, cool new wave album. There's a lot of new wave before it. There's a lot of new wave comes after. New wave barely even really means anything. Like I say, Cars completely changed their sound anyways after this album for Candio. So yeah, they're both amazing albums. And as much as I love the DMZ album, I actually like both of these albums, both this and the Boston more, but probably the album I love the most out of all this melange is this one.
It goes back to Aerosmith.
There you go. So let's go with Cars.
I want to say something, because I remember when the Boston album came out. Of course, I was a kid, but I didn't hear it and go, "Oh my God!" When the Cars album came out, new wave was all brand new, shiny. We never heard anything like that in the States. The Cars was like the first thing, and to hear it, it's like something came out of the sky and landed on the earth, you know? But I'm not talking, but I mean, I know exactly what you're saying though, Mark. It was shiny and new. There wasn't really like anything else quite like it. Now you look at that Cars album compared to other new wave albums, and maybe the Cars album looks a little benign. I don't know. There are other albums, but that was really our first taste, at least I remember, in Central Ohio, was the Cars, and that it really took right off. It was just
I mean, punk had already happened. I mean, There's nothing completely super weird about it. It's just It's got this really nice, subtle, loads of personality to it kind of thing, right? And Roy Thomas Baker's part of that, and like I say, Rick's vocals are part of that. The fact that it's fairly heavy is part of that. It's pretty guitar-y. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a much fresher, less corporate seeming music than the Boston album.
100%. All right, cool. Well, Butch, look at Butch's face. What's your thoughts, Butch? Cars.
I love both. Well, I like both bands a lot, and I like both records a lot. And actually, one of the hard lessons I learned in this is that I thought I had the first Cars album, and I don't, which bummed me out. I just went looking to pull the two records, and I'm like, I don't have it. I have three of their albums, none of which is the first one. So,
which I don't know if you noticed, but you didn't see me showing a Boston album. I'm looking all over. Where the hell's my Boston album? I couldn't find a copy of that.
I don't know how many times, and I'm sure this is one of those records that I've been in the record stores, and I'm like, I've had it, and I'm like, I feel like I have this. I'm not going to buy it because I don't want to rebuy it. Now I know I don't have it. Yeah. Next time I'm in the attic in Millville, I'm getting it. Anyway, this is kind of like more of a gut thing for me. I mean, I like the Cars. And I mean, God, I didn't, looking at the track list from the record, I didn't even realize like how many songs still get played on the radio. I'm counting, like, if you include Moving in Stereo, it's like 6. That song just seems to have like 4 or 5 over the years, that's like a lot of bands, like there's bands that have covered it. Fu Manchu covered it, and it gets mentioned a lot by people. But I mean, Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl, Just What I Need is one of my favorite songs of all time. You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love. I mean, and the movie, all those still get played
Classic.
at some point on classic rock radio and alternative radio. So it's an important record. I mean, and I dig the Cars up until I don't know, when I first heard them, I was a kid. This is during MTV. So I would have gotten taken in by Shake It Up was one of the first songs I remember really being into. I just loved that song a lot. And then Just What I Needed, like I said, I've loved that song since I first heard it, everything about it. One of my old bands covered it. They wrote song after song, great songs. But as much as I like that record, for me, man, this record, this is not only, I think, a great record. This is probably one of my 10 favorite albums of all time. And I've heard every song on here on the radio. Even, Hitch a Ride, which is a little bit less known, or Something About You than some of these other ones. Still, both of those, every goddamn song on this record has been played on the radio over the years. I've heard them multiple times. And I just love, Brad Delp, again, one of my probably 5 or 10 favorite singers ever. I love the guitar harmony stuff on here. I'm a sucker for guitar harmonies. The songwriting on here is off the charts. Great. Schultz is just a mad wizard with this record. The way it sounds phenomenal. Compared to a lot of stuff coming out at the time, it sounds I don't know, it just sounds incredible. And just everything about this record from top to bottom, there's not a dead spot on it. For years, for me, really the low point was Let Me Take You Home Tonight, which I was always kind of neither here nor there on, but even that over the years has grown on me. But the sonics of this record, this was when they came out with CDs, this was one of my friends' family got one, and they'd gotten the Boston one, and this was one of the first ones I said, when I get a CD player, it's gonna be one of the first CDs that I buy, because I got to hear it with that. And I don't know what else to say. Just so many of these songs. There's Something About You is phenomenal. I love all of these. More Than a Feeling. I don't care how many times they play it on the radio. If it comes on, I'm turning it up, and I'm singing along with it poorly because I can't hit those notes. Never could, even in my best days. Peace of Mind is great. Foreplay, Long Time. Foreplay was always one of those ones that you would just crank, because that whole intro into the song just sounded so good, loud. Rock and Roll Band's one of my longtime favorites. Smoking, the whole organ solo in the middle is awesome. And Hitch a Ride, I think, might be the dark horse song of the record for me. I think it's one of the best songs in the band's catalog. It really is that easy for me. I love the songs the most. They resonate with me I remember hearing More Than a Feeling on the radio as a kid when I was riding my parents' car. So there's a nostalgia thing for me with that. And then when I got into music later in the 80s and came back to this record, I was blown away by it again. Again, the Cars were were kind of like a band. I don't remember hearing them in the 70s as a kid, but when I was a teenager, early teens, when I first started getting into music, period, like I said, MTV kind of introduced me to them. So they were kind of concurrent for me. And I like those records up until Heartbeat City, which I think is a little bit too commercial for me. But the stuff before that, I think, is brilliant. And I love Ben Orr's voice, and I love the way that he and Rick Ocasek, I love the different voices that they have. And, Elliot Easton's guitar playing is phenomenal. But this is the call for me. I just think it's a great hard rock record. AOR, whatever, maybe the greatest AOR record, and one of my top 10 favorites of all. Perfect, probably my favorite debut album too. And I got, I like bands. There are bands I like a lot more overall than Boston, because their catalog's not as consistent after that record. Although I do like Don't Look Back, but that record, man, Love that record.
Nice.
All right, cool. All right, Parish, you're up.
Well, I think I'm going to be the contrarian here. I don't particularly like either album.
Well,
Now, there's a history here. Back in '76, when the Boston album came out, it was absolutely slated by the UK press as overproduced, no soul, everything that was wrong with heavy rock music. And to a 13-year-old, I agreed. I wanted my heavy rock to be mean and lean and sort of not particularly overproduced. And yeah, I just didn't get it. And with one exception, which I'll come back to in a moment, I still don't kind of get it. I've been listening to it for the last couple of days, kind of hoping that something would click. And I still think it's overproduced and lacks soul. Yeah, really well played. The vocals are fantastic. But yeah, it just doesn't do anything for me. But then neither do the Cars. So the thing with the Cars is, I mean, I've got to say, neither band were particularly big over here. I mean, they had modest success, as in their albums got in the top 20 and the singles got in the top 20, but they weren't big bands. And the Cars kind of fizzled out with one song, which was My Best Friend's Girl, which went to number 3 and only went to number 3 because it was the very first picture disc available in the UK. And I, like every other kid of my age, went out and bought it because we wanted a picture disc. Didn't particularly like the song. Always thought it was like a poor man's Elvis Costello or Graham Parker or somebody like that. So, and again, I've listened to the album. What I will say about the Cars, though, is I do think they release good singles. You know, when you do one of those shows, you only need the greatest hits. Well, the Cars is that band for me. I like the greatest hits, but I don't particularly like the rest of the albums. So, so I went back to listen to the Cars today, and yeah, there's 3 really good songs on it, which were the singles, including My Best Friend's Girl. So I kind of left with this as the poser, because the one exception to Boston's debut is More Than a Feeling, which I think is an absolutely fantastic, brilliant, epic song. And I do think that's a brilliant song, but I think it's a one-off. I don't particularly like anything else on the album, but I can play that all day long. If it comes on the radio, I'll wind down the windows and sing along loud as I can, do the air guitar without crashing the car, all of that. So one brilliant song. And if I go to the Cars, Best Friend's Girl is a brilliant pop song. It is a brilliant pop song. So I decided I'm going to conclude by just 2 songs. Which do I prefer, More Than a Feeling or Best Friend's Girl? And it goes to More Than a Feeling. So even though I think, the album slightly by the Cars, I just think that's such a brilliant song. So I'm going to give it to Boston. But I'm not a huge fan. In fact, I did begin to wonder why I signed up to tonight, actually, because I think I'm going to get so much abuse from everybody in the comments.
We love that you come from the UK with that singles perspective, though.
Yeah, there you go.
But Parish, I can see your point, though. Look at all those new wave bands, the punk bands, the thriving music that was over in the UK when you would hear the Cars compared to the Clash or whatever. Pick your new wave band to compete with.
But to be honest,
but the Cars would seem pretty...
Yeah, but I mean, I really like the Ramones. I really like Blondie. I like Television. I like Talking Heads. So it's not as if I didn't like American new wave. And likewise, I'm huge on AOR. I love Foreigner. I love REO. I love Journey and Kansas. I suppose you probably think Kansas is punk rock, but I think of them as AOR. So I like all of that. But I just found Boston was soulless. It's just very well produced, but no soul, I'm afraid. Despite all of that, I'm still picking Boston. So there you go.
All right.
Contrarian even to myself.
I think that the these albums are really interesting. I look at the Boston debut and Don't Look Back as two of the same records. You could take all those tracks, mix them up, because they have the exact same tonality. They don't sound any different at all. I think that both of those records are great. Same with the Cars. You mix up the debut Cars album, Candio.
Really? Are you sure? I mean, I thought the Cars is just way more just rocking, big heavy beats, guitar, bass, and drums. Candio brings in a lot more keyboards, doesn't it?
Album sounds exactly the same.
Really?
Tonality, production wise.
All right.
So could have more
Cars. I'm not a massive Cars fan.
I love the freaking Cars. Love it. And those, of course, the Cars wins for me. But I think that doesn't mean much because looking at this, Boston's debut, of course, were 1976. It sold 17 million copies, peaked at number 3 on the Billboard chart. Cars album sold 6 million copies and peaked at 18. Boston outsold it. The public has spoken. You know, critically, the critics did not care for Boston at all because exactly what the Parish is saying. There is no soul there. It's cold. But you look at it now, and it doesn't really sound that way. It sounds absolutely brilliant. Because God, if we could go back to that time period and produce something like that now, it'll never happen, but it'd be great. But what I'm trying to say is, I think sales-wise, I think Boston wins. Artistically, the Cars win because they were doing something here that when we heard it over, at least in the Midwest, because we didn't hear anything else, it was like a breath of fresh air. And the Boston, even though it sold and we talked about it, we never really looked at it back in the day like it was, you know, something that special. Though, you know, it is something special, you know. One of the best recorded demos ever, you know. Tom Schultz was an absolute genius with what
the Boston is like a Rembrandt or a Dutch master, and the Boston is, and the Cars is like a Rothko right. Or a Jasper Johns or a Basquiat, or you know what I mean? Like one is realism and one is modern art, right?
Well said. That's how I look at it. I much prefer the Cars over Boston, though I will say those Don't Look Back and Boston, I could listen to those albums over and over, never get tired of it. Same with Candio and same with the debut Cars album. Love them all, but I have to give Boston the win because it performed way outside of what the Cars did. So
I would argue that, or I will offer that, you know, Boston certainly, from a production standpoint, you know, it can sound sterile or very, very produced, or I mean, that was Tom Schultz's kind of thing, right? Which is why there's a rock man and all that other stuff. But I think with technology, for those people that think that they kind of look at the Boston album as having no soul, with technology now, being able to go back and just, if you listen to Brad Delp's vocals isolated, and then come back and say there's no soul, I think you would look at it differently. It gets lost in the production and how those songs are crafted with the technology. But I mean, I don't know how you can listen to those isolated vocals of Delp and say that there's no soul on that record.
Well, the vocals are fine, but the guitars on it are very cold. And I mean, you have to admit, though, a lot of people love that sound. There was really nothing else in the world of guitar then that sounded like that. So it was kind of fresh sounding, but it's also very sterile. You listen to Elliot Easton, which is an absolutely brilliant player. All his parts are thought out. There's soul in his playing. He could play anything you threw at him. It's just different, but there's nothing that sounded like that Boston album. It was revolutionary in that sense. In fact, there's no other guitar that ever sounded like Boston album other than what's-his-name's solo album sounded exactly like a Boston album.
Barry Goudreau.
The first Barry Goudreau album, we did a one and done on that. I love that album. But it sounds exactly, because it's the whole band without Tom on it. But it sounds exactly like Boston. So who's really got the Boston sound? I don't know.
And where does the Joe Perry project, like the music,
I love the Joe
talking, fit in this?
That Joe Perry project is a 10 out of 10 album, ladies and gentlemen. I love it. The first Joe Perry album smokes.
I've tried with those 3 records, man. I don't know. They just don't speak to me. They don't speak to me that much.
I've said that before.
I don't know why.
That's my favorite
Oh.
Aerosmith album. Is the first Joe Perry.
I've upset Butch so much he sat there with his arms crossed and he's glaring at me. I'm sorry, Butch.
No, that's just I honestly I sit like this like all the time. It's not
That's right.
it's not a
But
statement of
But Martin, you like the first Joe Perry project?
I think it goes about 9, 7.53. They fall off really fast,
But
and that's what the Cars is for me too. I
yeah.
started about a 9.5 with this album. I go down to a 7 for Candio, and then I'm continuing on
See,
down.
Candio's my favorite.
Same with Boston for that matter, right? I mean everything after Don't Look Back is just too much politics, too much dirty laundry, too many moving parts, all that time changing labels, corporate America, all that kind of stuff.
I think it was that album. Davey Gallagher and I did a show, God, a year ago, looking at that album. I think it was that one. Oh
Corporate
my
America.
God, it's something in that era. It was absolutely hideous.
That album's garbage, man.
What the heck happened? Guess Tom couldn't sustain it. I don't know. Maybe it was the chemistry of the original band.
I think Corporate America was after Brad's death, right? Wasn't that the last one? And I know there's some material.
No, Brad's on Corporate America. Yeah, Brad's on Corporate America. That
a little bit.
That one
I
with
think it
Tom.
was-
I forget the name of the last record they did with the guy from Lowe's or Home Depot.
Hope,
Yeah.
love. Live.
Maybe it was that
Also not
record.
good.
You're right. Yeah.
I almost got the impression with that record because I interviewed Tom for that record, right? And we talked so much about, I tried to like get in there saying why the electronic drums and all that, and he was so enthusiastic about it. Almost rose to the biggest technological challenge for him. I wanted to do so much. I wanted to breathe so much humanity into electronic drums is kind of the way he was putting it. He said, if you listen to every little hit, they're all recorded different and all this. It's like, Tom, they just still sound like electronic drums. And it's like a non-starter for a lot of people. Right. So it's like I think the whole technological challenge of making that album took over and he forgot about, the humanity of having band members having real drums on it and stuff. I think anytime you do that, it's really a non-starter. There's the way that we go through. I won't go through the whole, but there's this thing with the last Tank albums with Algie Ward where he had to use an machine drumming on it, and I think they're still brilliant. But it's just a shame, right? You just wish that final piece of the puzzle was there. So, anyways,
it was Life, Hope. Wait a minute, Life, Love, and Hope is the album we looked at.
Yeah, that's the posthumous one, but. Looking at Corporate America, I mean, even though Delp's alive, he only does lead vocals, at least what I'm looking at, on 4 songs, right? So you're already getting it disjointed. Nothing against Frank Cosmo.
Am I getting the record wrong? I can't remember which one is full of electronic drums. It's one of those two.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. I don't know the years on them or whatever. But that's the one I interviewed him for. It was when he was putting out the one with all the electronic drums. So yeah.
Ooh. So what do? We have what's the general consensus? Boston, evidently.
It feels like it's split really because you do prefer the Cars, but you went with Boston because it sold more. It is clearly the winner.
Art's a complicated thing, right? Art versus craft, right? Modern art versus realism. That's do you want a Robert Bateman perfect painting of a wolf? Is that art to you, or do you want a big couple of an orange and a blue square on the wall? Right? Is that art? We know which one sells for more now, and that means that the critically acclaimed one is the 2 squares, right? And the Cars album is the 2 squares. It's the aesthetically making that perfect dance of this is a piece of art. Where the Boston, it's like the critics hate it, and it's just considered just a very nicely made table, right?
That sums it up, ladies and gentlemen.
I think so. Finely made table.
100%. We do want to hear from you in the comments. Please let us know, which one do you prefer? Is it Boston or is it the Cars? Let us know. All right, let's wrap this dog up. I want to thank the panel tonight. Was David. We've got Butch, who is still going by the name Brian. Still.
I'll fix it one of these days.
I know,
man.
fix it, because I keep calling you Butch and Brian. We had the Parish and the Mark myself. If you'd like to be on these pages, we'd love to have you. We have a Patreon if you'd like to join that. We always throw up these shows prior to their airing nationally on YouTube, and then we have a
Grant, have you ever gone with Pete Pardo? Gone on with Pete Pardo and called him Peter because his little thing says Peter, right? You're not thinking. You're looking. Oh, Peter.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes this thing I think is said Peter Pardo. So
Or Peter Parker. I should call him Peter next time. But we also have a Ko-fi. Buy us a pint or a cup of coffee. That would be wonderful. We also take donations, whatever. We're just here talking music. Hopefully we can turn you on to something. And we do really want to hear your thoughts on Boston and the Cars. All right, gentlemen, have a good week. This, like I said, the show, we just put up the Van Halen top 5 Van Hagar tracks that will be airing tonight. Actually, it's going to premiere here. Whatever. By the time this is up, it'll already be premiered. And what was the thing we just did, Butch? David, you both were on that.
Put me on the spot.
Oh, you know. Well, that's up next too, and then this will come out. All right.
Why can't I think of it? We just
talked about it. That's right. We do a lot of shows here.
Concerts.
That's it. First three concerts,
which was a fun discussion. We've learned a lot about the Elder of Rock. I'm just going to say that. Sorry, everybody. We'll see you. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys.